just listened to a podcast about human sacrifice. Anyway.
What am I supposed to do with that information?
What I'm saying is that it took us a long time to figure out how the civilization thing works and how it makes people's lives better. I'm not sure we figured that out, though. Anyway. Yes.
I feel like I'm going to need a link to this podcast because...
So this is a podcast that right now is focused on early prehistory, really.
Okay.
In early history across, right now, China, but across the world. And you can see from records that, especially in the last 20 years, people have looked at, that life, when civilization emerges, life actually gets worse, not better for most people. For the people on top, it's fantastic, or it's better. But for the vast majority of people, it's actually worse than it used to be before, from a health perspective, from all kinds of perspectives. It is not as good and often much, much worse. Diet is worse, life expectancy is worse. It's an interesting thing because I think we have this vision of progress and civilization as improving the outcomes for everybody. That whole idea about lifts all boats. Mm-hmm. And it turns out, not so much, not even remotely. So it really points out that maybe the last 150 to 200 years were the anomaly to the way history worked and not. Anyway.
Okay, well, to segue...
into what we're going to talk about. Yeah.
Right, like, so civilization doesn't necessarily improve life. However, we're going to talk about technology, which is one of the tools that we utilize to make our lives more efficient, make our lives more streamlined, make our lives, like, happier. Maybe, possibly. Happier? I don't know. This podcast might have...
Well, and I think there's a difference. So if we want to draw back to that picture, there's a difference between the big picture, which may be that things are not as fantastic, and the individual lives that within the structures that exist, there are certain things about civilization, in this case technology, that can improve your immediate life. Does it improve everybody's life or life of humanity? That is a different question. And that question is more challenging, but it's definitely true.
Do you know what's challenging?
Yeah.
Is making a link between starting with human sacrifice and research technologies.
Yes.
And yet I managed to do it.
Props.
Go me. Super excited. So today on Not That Kind of a Doctor, that is exactly what we're talking about. We're going to talk about some of the technologies that we use.
And we will not be talking about human sacrifice, just to clarify.
But maybe thinking about it, potentially. I don't know.
Preferably not. I'm Guy Tradin. I'm a professor here at UNL.
I'm Nick Hughesby. I'm an associate professor of elementary literacy education, K6 here at UNL.
And we're going to talk about different kinds of technologies that can actually help you when you're in my emphasis. So this idea, as Nick and I were talking about, what are we going to talk about today? I came up with the idea of talking about software that can make your life better as a researcher, as even as an instructor. And I come to it from a realization I actually had, and that is the time in my life that I learned the most about software that still carries me to this day was when I was a graduate student and a young assistant professor. That's where I learned, and I kind of set a foundation. And ever since then, I've been using more or less, with some changes, the same or a similar set of tools. So they've become foundational to the way I work. And I think partially it's because that is a good time to start. And that is the time where you have, it feels like you don't have any time, but it's actually the time that you have the most time to dedicate to setting things up. And because you're just starting out, you have less to set up. So I have right now 20-something years of data and things I've collected and all of that. It's really hard to backfill that into the first thing we're going to talk about, which is the reference management software, RMS.
RMS.
Yes. And so if you have a long career and you've always kind of managed to search things and find them and drop them at the last minute into a paper or collect them as you go, then it's hard to take all of that I've written about and all the references I have and backfill it into a system. But if you're starting out, or if you're in the first few years of starting out, it seems like a much more achievable project that becomes just the way you work.
And my understanding is you do not use an RMS.
And no, I do not. I have tried multiple times, but I always feel like this is too late for me. And
Okay.
so
I want to talk through a couple of things
Yes,
that I think
absolutely.
might be helpful. So one, let's talk about the different kinds of RMSs that are out there. RMS, Reference Management System. When you're thinking about building a sustainable writing practice in academia, like there's the reality that you don't have these uninterrupted blocks of time any longer. You don't have, these huge spaces within which to do that work. So really you need to be able to be as efficient as possible with the half-hour blocks or the 15-minute blocks as you possibly can. And RMSs are one way to do that. And essentially a reference management software is going to allow you to, as you read articles, log all of the bibliographic information around those articles. And typically when we think about an RMS, we think about the construction of the bibliography, the construction of in-text citations as you write, which is super helpful, right? When we're thinking about an efficiency standpoint, that's one less thing that we then have to do. And a really good RMS is going to allow you to reference in a variety of different styles, whether it's APA or MLA or Chicago, what have you. So it's a nice piece of software to have and to invest in it's kind of like, it is a little bit like a pet. Like you have to feed it, you have to keep it up and just continually utilize it, right? It's one thing to have it, it's another thing to utilize it. It's like the Weight Watchers app. You have to use the Weight Watchers app in order to, lose the weight if that's what your goal is, right?
Yes.
So like if my goal is to be more efficient in my writing process, I need to utilize my RMS. So one of the first things that I look for is really the features of that reference management software, and kind of the pinnacle of reference management is EndNote. EndNote's been around forever. It's probably one of the, if not the first RMS that was out there. And the nice thing about that, the other thing to be thinking about is the cost of this software, right? So EndNote you can buy just as a flat out standalone. Like I'm kind of over subscriptions. Can't tell a lie. That's part of the reason I got rid of my last RMS. Like I've moved from RMS to RMS to RMS as features have evolved, right? What works well with Google Docs, that's the environment within which I work. Think about the environment within which you work. Typically, if you're a Word person, EndNote's great. If you're a Google Doc person now, EndNote is also great, but it wasn't always great, right? So be aware of what the features are and what the limitations are. And beyond that bibliographic element, the other thing that I find that I look for is integration with particularly my iPad, my tablet. That's where I read, that's where I annotate articles that I've collected. I typically index all my subscriptions on browsing and then import articles that are of interest, read them, annotate them, upload them into my EndNote. And that has created a much more streamlined process for me as I try to shift reading to feed my writing within the same system. So if you are someone who, like yourself, is like, oh, it's too late to get started.
Yeah.
Like part of the friction there is, oh my gosh, I can't use this unless all of my back stuff is in there.
Yeah.
And I want to push you
Okay, I'll be pushed.
to what happens if you just
Start it now.
start it with the stuff you're actually using in the writing that you're doing.
Yeah.
Right? Just the articles,
Mm-hmm.
the book chapters,
Mm-hmm.
the websites that you are using for that piece right there.
Yeah.
Because that's really all you need. Like, in order to get through and make that piece of technology useful for the writing that you're doing, that's really all you need.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole, oh, but I need everything in there is a distraction.
Yeah, it is a distraction, and it can be a time waster. So
Mhm.
one of the things that I'm interested when I look at the software package like that is how easy it is to transition from this
Mhm.
software to another. Because one is, EndNote has been with us for a long time, but we're not sure it's going to be here forever. What happens if one day it ends and you still need to take all your information and go somewhere else? It also allows you, if you decide this is not good enough, to pack it up and go. And I think most RMSs are pretty good about being able to export.
Yeah, I was in a situation, I was using an RMS called Papers that was, it played really well with Macs. This was at a time where not all the RMSs played well with Mac. Mac was becoming more and more of a power player in terms of machines, and it got bought out. And overnight, this update happened, and I didn't recognize what my RMS was anymore. So I switched over to a different RMS, PaperPile, and I've jumped from, I'm kind of the opposite, where I've jumped from RMS to RMS to RMS to RMS to RMS. And for the most part, it functions well.
Yeah.
Like, I think in this last, I recently went into EndNote this summer, and as I am importing 20 plus years of citations.
Yeah, that's
I had maybe like 5% that were like, this is incomplete.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll deal with those when
yeah.
I have to. I'm not going to worry about them right now, right?
Yeah.
So like, I find it productive to keep in mind what the technology, the purpose of the technology is not for me to collect all these things. These are not Stanley cups. Right? But it is to help me write more efficiently. Are the articles, are the book chapters that I need right now in there, and are they accurate? Great. Moving on.
Yeah.
I will deal with those, that 5%, when it becomes important. Do I even need that 5%?
If it becomes
If it becomes important, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a use the tool, don't let the tool use you.
Yeah, and that's a really important thing about any of these pieces of software. There's always going to be a painful learning curve and usability curve that's going to happen early on. And that's fine. But if that pain continues indefinitely, you're just doing the wrong thing, and you need to choose something that is a better fit. And it's also, I've learned, for some people, it's a way to really procrastinate while seemingly productive. And that is, you can overspend time on a piece of software and avoid the real work that needs to be done because you're going back 20 years and trying to fix all
productive
of those.
Procrastination, right?
Yes.
If my kitchen is sparkling clean, I haven't been engaging in productive procrastination. That is a sign.
Yes.
That is a sign.
Yeah.
Right? So, don't do that. But also recognize that as you're using that tool, and I've become more and more aware of this as I moved from one system to the next, is when you're starting to utilize a new tool, it's going to take time.
Yeah, for sure.
It's going to feel like, oh, this is not saving me any time. This is not. I've found myself as I'm moving into EndNote, and I mean, it's I've been using it now for 6 months.
Oh, that's
6 months-ish.
Okay.
And it is, I remember when I first started it going, oh my gosh, this takes so much time.
Yeah.
Well, of course it does. I'm learning a whole new system. Like I need to be able to suck at this for a little bit before it becomes efficient. And now it's so much more efficient, right? Like I've gotten the EndNote click thing figured out, and I've got it speaking to my my Google Drive, and like all of that is figured out. But I would say the first 3 months was a lot of reminding myself of, this is new, this is okay.
And this is probably why I haven't engaged, because the truth is that the citation, the emphasis on citations happen at the end of writing. And so you can ignore it for the longest time and just put empty parenthesis or, something that reminds you of. And then at the end, you suddenly have a pile of work that you could have completely avoided by having a good piece of software that would just make that transition so much easier. And then you don't get the comments about, your formatting on your references. And it's just fairly painful to go through and attend to all of those details. So that's where it comes I would argue, super helpful at the end point. And that's easy to avoid at the beginning. So, and I think about that as we transition from that, if that's okay, to talk about data analysis. So in data analysis, there are great pieces of software for quantitative analysis that have been there for a long time. And again, I think that learning them while you're taking the classes that do that work is fantastic, because then people help and guide you and give you a lot of references, probably a few books that help you work through them. So that's useful, and that has been done a lot. On the qualitative side, there are quite a few interesting pieces of software out there. And but I know a lot of people who don't work with any software, and I think it's the same problem as with the RMS, and that is, if you have a piece of software, it really becomes easier to go back and reinforce and add to and be more agile with it. And if you don't, can you do the analysis? Absolutely. People do that all the time. And it also depends, obviously, in qualitative, what kind of qualitative analysis you do. But that ability to add to it, to layer it, to ask interesting questions depending on where the data is, becomes much, much stronger where you have a piece of software. Because if you do it manually, there's a point where your brain is saying, that's enough, right? You can't add to this because it's more than I can contain. And software just leverages that.
Right. Software helps you manage.
Yeah.
Right. And make sense of in slightly different ways. And this is, again, if you're a grad student and you're thinking about qualitative data software or SPSS, quantitative software, any kind of software really is going to cost some amount of money if it's not provided to you by your institution. And so the first thing that I always try to think through as I'm thinking about a software for analysis is, what are the functions that I need? What are the demands of the project that I'm working with? And then 2, what is my budget? And do I have, again, can I sustain a subscription model for a piece of software? I really like Deduce. Deduce is a qualitative software platform, but it's a subscription. So every month, it's
I know.
Like $17.
I get that announcement on my Deduce. You have not paid in a while.
Yep. Yeah. And so I've not sponsored the qualitative software analysis that I like the most is Transana. I've used them since grad school, which is a very long time, and there's 2 things that are important with Transana that I've really appreciated. Is 1, it handles a wide variety of data and data format. So like, I can analyze PDFs, I can analyze audio, I can analyze video, I can analyze text. It tackles it all. And David Woods, who's one of the original creators of the software, like, if you email him, he responds back within like 48 hours. Like, that's what I aspire to, is returning email in 48 hours. And he somehow manages to do it, and will literally talk you through or be whatever like, here's the tutorial. and or take feedback, because like PDFs was something I was begging for. And he was like, yep, no
Here it
problem.
is.
Here it finally is. Like, thanks for being patient.
Yeah.
And it works well.
Yeah.
Right. And so thinking through not only cost, but like what is going to give you the most bang for your buck? What is going to be not just for this project, but adaptable to other projects?
And that's where asking around and looking at comments online, because one thing that is hidden until you get the product and start interacting is the customer support. And customer support is critical because all of these pieces of software, there's a moment where you're like, I need to help figuring this out, and I can probably do that, but I don't have the time. And somebody has figured that out. So understanding if there are user groups, that's one option. And the other option is how long before they respond to you and give you support. I started with Atlas TI as a graduate student. It's still my preference, although I've used a number of them. But they've always been fairly responsive. And so it was, and they have the two options. So they, for example, just as an example, again, thinking about cost, they have a permanent license, just buy, download. You don't get a lot of updates, so you get an updates up to a point, but it'll keep working on your machine. They'll keep supporting it. You just won't have the newest, best thing, maybe. Or maybe you will. But they also have a subscription model that you can start off and keep paying on whatever annual, semi-annual, or monthly. Everybody's got all of these pricing structures. I agree with you. I like paying once and knowing that I have a piece of software instead of trying to remember to renew every month or just when I need and all of that. That creates just more friction where I need no friction. I just need to be able to go and do the analysis. And I'm also a little bit worried about having our data floating in the ether, and we trust them to make sure that there's protections. But the minute it gets sent into the cloud, I'm a little bit worried. So you need to de-identify before, and there's just more layers that you have to go through to make sure that if anything happens, that your participants are protected, as you promised to.
Right.
And that's something to consider. So those are the things that I think about. But again, starting early, buy it when you're a graduate student or try it out. It's usually priced for graduate students in a different way. So that's easy. And if you get a position and you're starting somewhere, use your startup funds to get your basic software needs. And again, perpetual licenses are better because startup funds are once.
Right.
You get them when you start, and then you don't have them. So not having to maintain licenses would make your life a lot easier to manage when you're earning less and you're very likely to use these pieces of software repeatedly.
Right. And I think to come back to a larger theme, like don't worry about starting early, just worry about starting.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Wherever you are, like just start and use it as you need in that moment. Like there's no need to backfill, right? Like
absolutely.
I also recently updated my Transana. The other thing that I like about, again, not sponsored, not a subscription, but they do have this process by which you get the next, I believe it's the next update for a very reduced fee.
Yeah.
Which is always nice that's out there. But like with some of the new features, again, that notion of like, it's taking me a little while to get used to them and they're really handy. But again, I'm wrestling with that, like, I already know this software. This should be easier. Yes, but this is a new feature.
Yeah.
And this is something that's going to really help me. So it's worth investing in. I also did not backload all of my old projects.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So
that's like, an easier thing.
Those all live on my external hard drive. If I need them, they're there. But because I've worked with Transana for so many years, they're there. I know I have them. Like my dissertation, I still have all those Transana files. So like I can go back to those if I need to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the biggest thing is start and take advantage of free trials of things. And if they give you I know a lot of RMSs, for instance. I'm working with RMSs with grad students in 953, our academic writing class.
Yeah.
And I asked them to take different RMSs for test drives. And for 2 weeks, really use those RMSs and what do they look like? And what do you like about this one? And what do you like about this one? And if they've already have an RMS, they tend to stick with the one that they've already got, which makes sense, right?
Up to a point, but I think that idea of a test drive with an RMS, because there are issues around ease of use on both on the entry and on how easy it is to merge into your software. And suddenly you find out that thing is so much better than what I'm using. It's worth switching to. Same thing with analysis, I would argue.
And I've had some students like switch RMSs, right? And same thing with, again, that analysis piece. Like if you get a month free subscription, what's a chunk of analysis that you can do in depth for a month, get a sense of how that software works? Is that going to work when you explode it into a larger project? Is that going to make sense for you?
Yeah.
Right? So taking advantage of those, because you don't want to invest not a ton of money, but like some of these programs are expensive. Some of the software is expensive. So you don't want to invest in, it's like you don't want to invest in clothes you don't wear.
That is definitely true.
You don't want to invest in software that you're not going to use. Like
absolutely.
It may not be the like most streamlined, like Transcend is not particularly streamlined. However, it gets the job done.
Yeah.
And I like it.
And that's important. Eventually there's a point where it's just as important. I mean, there might be something that is a little bit better, but if it's a little bit better, but you know the thing you have and you know how to make it go, the efficiency there is tremendous.
I'm trying to remember, what was the qualitative software? It was really popular like 3 or 4 years ago. Studio something.
I don't know.
It'll come to me. I could never play around with it because it was like
inaccessible.
$1,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And that just was that's not in my budget.
No.
I don't have money for that.
And that's been always one of those questions. The question of price is a really important question. And that's what sometimes turns you off from a piece of software. For a while, SPSS, when they got bought up by IBM, the price jumped and it became impossible to really have a full license. I used to have an SPSS with all the bells and whistles, and I had to give all the bells and whistles away. Now, in quantitative, which is more my jam in many ways, I have 3 or 4 pieces of software that I use depending on what I want. So SPSS is really good for me for just getting quick results, but the agility and the ability to do some programming and get finer grained results leads me back to SAS usually, and I use also HLM. So it really depended for a long time about what was the use case, going back to use case. And in qualitative, I've used a few as well. So it's got to be something manageable from a cost perspective, because you can't hold all of these. Now, more and more campuses create campus-wide licenses. We definitely do with the survey, with Qualtrics, which is great, because then you don't have to spend the money, and it is secure, which is really important when you're conducting research, unlike throwing something on Google Forms and hoping that it'll be okay, which I'm seeing way too much, to be honest. And so those are the things that are kind of on my mind as you're trying to find what you can get. So as a graduate student, go and try things out as a young assistant professor, but actually at any point, get the trial period.
Start.
2 weeks.
Start.
Do something with it. See if it works for you. You find something that is so much more amazing, or it's like, no, I like what I have, and that's fine. But don't avoid trying just because this is what you have and this is what you know. Try to move forward, says the person.
To date. It's good to date every once in a while. Put yourself out there. Just as long as it's ethical. But see what else is out there every once in a while. What is happening? Could you use it? And then if you go back to your comfort zone, it's perfectly fine, right? But like, if there's stuff out there that allow you to do things differently, it pushes your ability to think through what's possible, right?
Yeah.
Like Deduce has pushed me to think through different ways to use Transana minus the monthly subscription fee.
Yeah.
Right. Resolution for 2024: get my financial house in order.
Okay.
So no subscriptions
At all?
No, lies. I do have a cycle for streaming services. So I'm in an HBO Max and Amazon Prime phase. That's my cycle of streaming life at the moment. We're gonna move into Hulu as Amazon Prime goes away.
Yeah.
But like trying to be better because those subscriptions.
Yeah. I did want to bring out also an important point about cloud storage or storage in general. And especially as a graduate student, but even as a faculty member, realizing that you're not going to be forever at the same place, says the person who's been here for 22 years. But you have to think about if and when, right, you are moving, you get a job as a graduate student, or you move to a new institution, you have to think about how does your data move with you, because the institution always provides cloud storage, but it is the institution's cloud storage, not yours. So you have to think about, do I have an external drive where I back things up? Do I have a cloud storage that is not linked to my university that I can back up some files? And you have to think about security, but definitely ownership there.
Well, and so as someone who has not been here for 22 years, and who has moved institutions a couple of different times, one thing to keep in mind is like when you leave a position, when you come into a position, you get a laptop, right? Or a computer of some sort. When you leave a position, you give up that laptop too. So you have to think through what is your plan for technology transition, right? In between those jobs when you're moving from being a graduate student to being an assistant professor, and then if you move, what is your plan for that? I've always fallen on the side of I like a good encrypted solid state drive. Quite honestly, it backs up nightly. It just helps me feel better about like, where's my data? And I literally have images of every computer from dissertation computer on that hard drive. That's one of those things that I bought myself because with startup funds, technically the institution still owns that technology. So if it's something that I am moving with, and at that point, I didn't have enough money to buy a totally separate computer, right? So I bought a hard drive, and that's what I used as a transitionary point. And then when I moved here, I don't know if you remember that summer trying to work on that grant, and I was working on my iPad Pro. That was not a smart move. Like that was not a productive. Like I was able to be somewhat productive, but it's not a productivity device.
No, it is not.
So I don't think that I would go in that direction again. But it is, if you're looking to avoid again that subscription, solid state drive, you can use it as a backup on your computer, which you should normally do anyway. And then that provides a transitionary plan as you move from one device to the next, one institution to the next. And even within institutions, as your computer, wears out, and you move into a new computer, that's helpful to just, got a new computer, I'm gonna hook up my SSD.
And I can get everything,
Poof! It's like River Song in Doctor Who. It's just there, right?
That's a good reference.
And, it lives in the hard drive, and poof, it's like I don't have a new computer, but I have a new computer. It's faster, but all my stuff is here. It's like the best case scenario for moving.
That's actually, if you have that, it's the easiest part of moving.
Oh yeah, no, it's totally the easiest part of moving.
And that's the thing, because having seen a few people go through, oops, my computer has crapped out. If you're backed up, the transition is minimal. It really becomes just a box, and you can use any other box, and within a few minutes you have access to everything, so you've lost nothing, and that's good.
Well, and I think backing things up is perhaps, if you take anything from this podcast,
Okay.
I think it would be to back your stuff up and have that somewhere that's not on this computer, because regardless of, you might have the best RMS software, the best analysis software, and you might have done all this beautiful work, it ain't gonna matter if your computer fails and you don't have that backed up somewhere. So if you're thinking about utilizing this software, think about that backup plan, because stuff happens.
Yes.
Stuff happens. Videos disappear. Right? Things go away.
Yeah.
And then if you have a backup to go back to, like, that's essential. Like, don't assume it's always going to be there.
Yeah. And once you do, and this was my experience the last few times when I had a problem with my computer, is I borrowed another computer just for a period, while this one, it's like, the car is in the shop and I've got a replacement car, but within 5 minutes I'm running. It's like, it doesn't matter really. It's just a box.
Up and moving.
Yeah.
Right. Like, this should not be the home.
Yes.
Right? This is the tool for things.
Yeah.
Right?
This is really the interface at
Yes.
this point in our lives.
Yeah.
All right.
So, we've talked about RMSs,
We talked about
analytical software,
and finally back things up.
back that hard drive up. Back it up. Make like a pickup truck, put it in reverse, and back it up.
Yep.
Is that like
That
enough?
is it. We
Okay.
are done.